I believe we're coming to you next. Now, my family were really happy that I was listening to you here because I do eat copious amounts of meat through the day, you know, during meal times. But apparently, my diet in between meals is not that healthy. So I'm apparently going to learn a little bit from listening to you tonight, and hopefully we'll follow some of the advice that you give. Okay.
Oh,
so,
great.
Sioned, drosto atoch chi. Okay.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, Hugh. Thank you very much for having me. Speak to you today because it's something that I'm quite passionate about, using our amazing local produce, and lamb is something I've grown up with and I still really enjoy. So I'm hoping you can see my screen. Yeah, awesome. So like I said, my name is Sioned Quirke and I'm a specialist dietitian. So I'll get straight into it. So the nutritional value of lamb is really impressive. So we've already heard a bit about the omega-3, the different fats, iron and zinc, but I wanted to tell you a bit about why they're important. So we're just going to go through each one and discuss that. So fats, although they're branded as quite evil in the media, they are absolutely necessary in our diet. So both the quality and the quantity is really important. So I think people tend to have kind of a bad view when we talk about the word fats. Actually, some vitamins like vitamin A, D, E, and K are fat soluble. Therefore, they are carried in fat and could not be absorbed without that fat. They provide essential fatty acids, like we heard a little bit from Larry. Around a third of the energy from our diet could come from fat, and the majority of that should be unsaturated. So we're looking a bit about the different types of fat. So it's well known in the evidence base that people tend to not have enough omega-3 in the diet, and that they should try and eat more omega-rich foods. Which we've heard, you know, lamb is a really good source of omega-3, especially the grass-fed lamb. So thank you to Larry for presenting that. So what we use to kind of recommend how much of a nutrient somebody should eat is a daily reference intake. So this one here is based on an adult female. Total fat should be about 70 grams a day, which is about a deck of cards, and saturated fats should only make up about 20%. So the types of fat, two main groups of fat, so saturated and unsaturated. Within the unsaturated fat, there are either polyunsaturated or monounsaturated. So like we said about saturated fats, in general, they're not as healthy for us as unsaturated fat, and they are mainly found in animal products. Saturated fats have been shown to increase blood cholesterol, therefore increasing a risk of heart disease. But we know that there are things you can actively do when you are eating animal products like lamb in order to reduce that saturated fat. So the first one is to trim off the visible fat before you cook it. And I know that doesn't go down well with a lot of foodies like myself who think about the flavour, but as obviously the fat on the outside heats up, then the fat will melt into the meat. So cutting it off after cooking isn't as effective. Unsaturated fats, like we were saying, are mainly in plant foods. And like I said, they're either polyunsaturated or monounsaturated, and that's just to do with the chemical structure. We've heard about omega-3. They're called essential, like Larry said, because we cannot produce them in the body. We have to consume them through our diet or supplements. So it's really important that we think about eating those foods. And I think a lot of people have heard about trans fat, and they've been in the press quite a bit. And those are naturally in meat and dairy foods, but at very low levels, and they're mainly found in processed foods and hard vegetable oils. We've heard about iron. It has so many different roles in the body. And I suppose different foods contain different amounts, but the most important thing to remember is the quality of the iron. So animal-based sources of iron are known as heme iron, while plant sources are non-heme iron. That's important because the absorption is dramatically different between both. So we absorb, up to 35% of heme iron, but the absorption rate kind of drops more than half for non-heme iron sources. So when people are trying to increase their iron intake and they do eat meat, then we do kind of try and encourage them to have meat sources because of that absorption. The requirements for iron is quite important that people think about how much they have, because iron deficiency anemia is quite common in the population. So adults here, we've got women need about 14.8 milligrams a day and men need about 8.7. And if you're a bit older, then that requirement for women decreases. And there's been a bit in the media about vitamin C and iron absorption, and I don't think there's enough of an evidence base for us to recommend that you must take vitamin C if you're eating sources of iron. So the next one we're on to is zinc. So this is particularly important for immunity, cognitive development, wound healing and bone metabolism. Again, the body doesn't actually produce zinc, so we have to obtain it through food or supplements. Red meat, especially lamb, is a really good source. So for people that are concerned about their zinc intake, it's a really good way of trying to make sure they have a little bit more. Requirements here are milligrams squared a day. Women require 7 and men require 9.5. And red meat, especially lamb, provide the majority of zinc in our diet. So onto protein. So lamb is mainly a mix of protein and fat. We all know that protein is really important and it encourages lean muscle mass. So it's really important throughout all the ages, especially for older people who may be losing some muscle mass if they're not as active. Lamb is a really rich source of protein, and depending on the cut, like we've heard Larry talk about, it can contain up to 30 grams of protein per 100 grams, which is a really high source. Very similar to iron, the quality of the protein that we eat is really important. And the amino acids, which are the little things that make up proteins, vary between food sources. So I think the important thing to remember here is lamb actually contains every amino acid that we require. Therefore, we class it as a complete protein source. So there's not a lot of other food sources that have that complete protein and amino acid profile. We tend to encourage people to try and have the complete sources. Other nutritional benefits of lamb, I'm not going to read these out, but you can see there's a table with vitamins and minerals. RDA stands for recommended daily allowance, and that's for an average adult male. So you can see that lamb is an excellent source of B vitamins, particularly vitamin B12, which is really important in the production of blood. So you can see 38% per gram is a really high source. Again, we looked at zinc, which is a mineral, but also look at the impressive profile of selenium, which is really difficult to obtain in other foods, and also phosphorus, and we spoke about iron. So a really kind of interesting nutritional profile that people don't kind of automatically assume that lamb would provide. And I obviously can't leave without talking about a balanced diet. I am a dietitian at the end of the day. So the picture here is the Eat Well guide, which shows what kind of proportion of foods should make up our diet. And protein is the pink one there at the bottom. It's really important for our health to make sure that we have a balanced diet. That means that we get all the essential vitamin, minerals, and nutrients that we require to be as healthy as we possibly can. So a portion of meat is 60 to 90 grams. And for red meat in particular, we say no more than 70 grams of red meat a day. So that's kind of 500 grams over the course of a week. So in conclusion, I think we've spoke that lamb has a range of really beneficial nutrients, a large amount of healthy fat, and high levels of omega-3, which is really beneficial for our health. Really high concentrations of bioavailable, so that's really good quality digestible protein. Lamb can be incorporated into a healthy, balanced diet. No need to worry about that. Not to eat more than 70 grams a day. And like we said, we can reduce the saturated fat if people are concerned about it by trimming off the visible fat before we cook. And also if people are concerned about the carcinogens that can be associated with meat, they just need to cook gently and at a lower heat. So diolch yn fawr, thank you very much, and I'll be taking any questions at the end.